Hello and welcome to the Leading Lives podcast here at the Login in Dorset. Now, going to a football match every week, having the best seat in the house and getting to watch the game free of charge, and even better still, being paid for it, must be everybody's dream job. One such person who's got that job joins me today. Welcome, Gary Taphouse.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, how are you doing, Gary?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Enjoying a bit of international break, so yeah, taking it easy for a couple of days.
You and I go back a long way. Can you remember when we first met?
Yes, it was when I was here at Bournemouth University in my final year, so 96, getting on for 30 years, isn't it? Which is quite scary. Yeah, great times.
Can you remember the first game that you actually came to and commentated on for us?
I can actually. I think it was Bournemouth against Bristol Rovers midweek, and Bournemouth won by 2-1.
God, that's impressive. You can remember that.
I've still got the VHS tape in the loft.
Wow.
It hasn't seen the light of day for many years, but yeah, it's there.
I can remember at the old Dean Court, those old rickety steps and climbing up
the ladder, the rusty ladder.
Yeah, that's it.
They wouldn't pass health and safety now.
It had rungs missing, didn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember the game when Manchester United came down in 1996?
Yes, so that was quite an event, wasn't it? Because we were used to seeing teams from the third tier, and then suddenly the glitz and glamour of Manchester United were in town with David Beckham and Sir Alex Ferguson and everyone else, and we were a bit like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, I remember it very well.
I've actually unearthed a clip which we can just watch now.
Oh, that's very well done past Harrington. Beckham shots! Oh, what a brilliant goal! And he's done it at Dean Court. Would you believe it? He's done very little all night, but he's come up with a cracker.
That goal from Beckham was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recognise my own voice there because I'm like 20 years old. So, yeah, obviously my voice has matured so much, but it was an incredible goal. I think it was the only goal of the game.
It was. Yeah.
So Bournemouth played really well because they had all the stars out. But yeah, amazing moment to actually, because Beckham was at the height of his fame.
Yeah.
And for him to score at Little Bournemouth, it was incredible.
And afterwards, you got to do probably one of your first ever senior interviews, wasn't it? Who was it?
Well, we were used to interviewing Steve Fletcher after the game, weren't we? He was like the representative of the players who'd come out and talk to us after every match.
Matt Holland.
Matt Holland, of course, who I know very well now. But yes, Sir Alex Ferguson agreed to be interviewed by us, which was, wow, it's so exciting, wasn't it? Because, he'd won all these trophies, one of the most recognisable faces in our game. I remember you saying, Chris, that suit looks very expensively tailored. Because it just hung off him beautifully, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
And yeah, he was charming and did a lovely interview with us. And I ended up interviewing him many times over the years. And I always found him to be an extremely charming guy.
He's got enthusiasm for the game, he works hard. He's got a good work ethic about him.
After little old Hallmark and Bournemouth Uni, what happened next to Gary Taphouse?
Well, I thought I'm going to go off and become a commentator. I thought it'd be easy, and of course it wasn't, because that's not the nature of the industry. But what I would say, Chris, is the video that we did for the end of season that year, which I went into HMV in Bournemouth and saw it for sale, and I just couldn't believe it. I thought I'd made it.
I was too tight to give you.
That tape was probably more valuable to me than my degree.
Really?
Because what it showed people and prospective employers was that I could do the job. And obviously, very quickly, I was listening to those commentaries thinking I've improved so much. I don't want to show people that anymore. But at the start, it was incredibly useful. And what happened next to me was I got a job on my local newspaper in South London. And a fax came through on my second day, again, showing how long ago it was. This would be 97. And the fax said that Crystal Palace Football Club were launching their own matchday AM radio station. And would I like to go along and cover the launch of it? I thought, brilliant. So I'm in one of the executive boxes and they've got the radio station coming through on the speakers. And it was Crystal Palace against Blackburn, start of a new Premier League season. They just got promoted. And I thought the commentary doesn't sound great, if I'm honest. And I spoke to the guy running it, and I gave him my tape, and I said, I could do that for you. I'd be really interested. And he goes, well, we can't pay you. I said, well, that's fine. He goes, have you done any radio commentary before? And I'm like, well, not exactly, but I'll give it a go. And he said, come on to the next game, which was against Chelsea, and we'll try you. So that's what happened. And I ended up, well, the game was hilarious because I'd written the script, and they threw to me before the teams were even out. So the script finished and there's still no players. And I just stopped talking. And on talkback, they're saying, Gary, please keep talking. This is radio. So, yeah, I just had to just blag my way through that, really. But it went fine. Chelsea won very comfortably, and we did some of the phoning afterwards as well. And they said, do you want to do next week? And I ended up doing that for several years.
Then you got a transfer to Chelsea.
Well, I did. But before that, we were sitting next to the Capital Gold people, and I listened to Capital Gold religiously. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Pearce was running it.
Right.
Sony Award-winning show. He was doing it in a very different way, very shouty, lots of scripted lines, but also very quickly going from game to game. It was very fast moving, and I wanted to be a huge part of that. For me, that was the dream. And our commentary position was right next to the Capital Gold position, and I got to know those people, and eventually I managed to worm my way in to do reporting on an FA Cup first round game at Fulham. And I had Jonathan Pearce queuing to me live on air, and I just thought, I've made it. This is the best moment of my life. And I ended up doing that at weekends, and although I wasn't paid much, it's about 35 quid, I was being paid for the first time to do reports and commentaries whilst I was doing my day job. So, yeah, incredible. And then this opportunity came up at Chelsea to do every game home and away for their digital radio station. So this was the very start of digital radio, 2001. Probably too soon. Not enough people had digital radios. It didn't survive, sadly. But Chelsea kept the station on because it was a good marketing tool, and they kept me on. And yeah, I had the best time of my life. I was with Kerry Dixon, and we were going home and away with the team, flying all over Europe in the Champions League, commentating on every game. And that's how I really honed my skills, because I was doing so many matches. And of course, at that time, Jose Mourinho had arrived, Abramovich had arrived, Sky were all over Chelsea, and I got to know them, all the people from Sky really well, and one thing led to another.
Did you ever do an interview with Roman Abramovich?
Well, no, we tried.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He absolutely, the closest I got to him was, I came out of our studio in Stamford Bridge, and he happened to be walking towards me, and I had several cups of coffee from Starbucks, and I almost walked into him, and security were on me in a flash, thinking I was some sort of threat. That was the closest I ever got to him. But we asked, and he always said no.
Eventually, you got your job with Sky, and because we've only got limited time today, and I've got a load of fun questions. I thought let's skip on to that. And so now just quickly, what do you actually do at Sky?
So there are basically 10 commentators who commentate on Sky outside broadcasts. There are some others who work on the EFL and Sky Sports Plus and what have you, but there are basically 10 of us who go to games. And so I commentate on live EFL matches, live WSL matches, Premier League games for Match Choice, so they go live around the world and Sky can show them later. So they're not live on Sky. And anything else that's thrown in my direction, really. I do about 70 to 80 games a season for Sky, and then another 50 on top for other overseas broadcasters as well. So it's a packed schedule, to say the least.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take a fun look. I've got a whole list of random questions here, not in any particular order. So we're going to be jumping around, and you're going to have to put your thinking cap on here. So let's start. Best stadium for your pitch view?
I mean, obviously I do a lot of the Bournemouth home games because I live in Bournemouth. So I actually really like the view from that stadium. Some people think it's very low. It's lower than when we used to do the games. But I very much like it. I mean, obviously the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the new stadium, is incredible. One of the best in the world. The gantry there is fantastic. There are very few I don't like, but West Ham is one because... as we know, that stadium was not built for football, and consequently the commentary position is so far back, ridiculously far back, and it's even worse if you work in radio, actually.
Yeah.
And I find myself looking at the monitor more than I would normally, because if there's a goalmouth scramble, you just haven't got a clue what's going on. However, I like going to West Ham, lovely people, and the matches are good, but the gantry, not for me.
I filmed in that stadium for the Olympics, actually, and it was a completely different experience than to what it is for football.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. My favourite is really for the crowd, actually. It's St James's Park. I just love going there.
Again, you're a long way back.
Yeah.
From,
very steep as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic atmosphere, obviously, but it wouldn't be my favourite gantry, I've got to be honest.
No. So, favourite manager or player to interview?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I mean, Harry Redknapp always springs to mind because, you know, back in the day when I used to do interviews after every single game, he was either at Portsmouth or Tottenham. And I did a lot of those clubs at the time. And I got to know him quite well, actually. And he could be difficult, don't get me wrong. And I'm sure we've all seen the clips on social media. But equally, I felt like you could ask him anything and he would accept it in good grace and give you a good answer. That wasn't always true, actually. But I've got to say Jose as well, because, again, working at Chelsea, I got to know him quite well. And although, again, he could be difficult, again, I felt I could ask him anything and he would always take it in good faith.
I think the thing with Jose, in my experience when I was filming football, that he's got his public persona, but behind the scenes, he's a super nice guy.
Very true.
What about your most difficult individual interview? Does one jump out at you?
There was one I did, Wigan versus Liverpool, Premier League midweek game. Rafa Benitez was at Liverpool and it was 1-1 and he was devastated they didn't win, and it was a really difficult interview. I think it probably lasted about 80 seconds in total, and that was with me asking probably a dozen questions. Very short answers, one-word answers, shrugging of the shoulders for an answer. And I came away feeling like I'd failed. And actually, Sky played that interview on Sky Sports News the next day every hour, because it didn't reflect badly on me, it reflected badly on him. Because I was asking perfectly reasonable questions and he was just batting them away, didn't want to do it. And of course, being a manager, especially in the Premier League, the media side of things has become more and more and more important, and it's in your contract. You're not talking to me, you're talking to the fans. It's we're the media. What that means is you're in the middle of it and you're the buffer. So if you're not giving answers, then you're actually failing the fans as much as you are us. So that one really springs to mind because I came away really down in the dumps from it.
I didn't know any of your answers before we started the podcast, but it's funny because I had a similar experience with the same manager after a Champions League game once. And so
there you go. And I've got to say, I've since spoken to him many times and he's always been absolutely lovely. I think it was just that one occasion after that particular game.
What about awkward names? Let's move on. Ever had one that you couldn't pronounce?
Well, do you know what, Chris? We're really lucky with the Premier League. What they do at the start of the season to avoid this is they sit all the players down in front of a screen and say, can you say your name as you want it pronounced?
Right.
And then we get the video of them all back to back and we've got no excuse. The problem comes when you have someone with an overseas name that's been anglicised. So, for example, a lad that played for Bournemouth, Jordan Ibe, I don't know if you remember him, came from Liverpool. He wanted his name to be Jordan Ibe. Now, he has Nigerian heritage, and it would have been pronounced eBay in Nigeria. So, consequently, you can't win. I would say Ibe because that's what the player wants, but then I'd get loads of tweets from people overseas saying that's wrong, it's eBay. And I say to them, well, if I say eBay, then I'm being disrespectful to the player and not saying what he wants.
Because wasn't it Clive Tildesley who got roundly criticised for James Rodriguez?
Yeah, that's right. He said James.
That's right. Yeah.
Anglicising of names is another constant subject among commentators. And, we all have our own view. We try and be consistent, but you can't win. You can't always win.
Following on from that, really, it's part of the research that you do before a game. How many hours research do you have to do before each game?
Well, I try to give it a full day. It's not always possible because I might have a run of many games in many days, but it's all about time management. So I usually allow between 6 and 8 hours. Obviously, it depends on the competition, because if it's a Premier League game, for example, Bournemouth-Manchester City the other week, two teams I know really, really well, so there was less prep involved. However, if it's a game I did earlier in the season in League Two, Harrogate versus whoever, then obviously I don't know those teams, and a lot more work has to go into it. But yeah, I mean, I usually allow a full day. So the funny thing about my job is 80% of it is either sitting in front of a laptop prepping or sitting behind a wheel driving, and the other 20% is amazing. But the other 80% is what people don't see.
Seeing as you've mentioned Bournemouth and Manchester City, we better have a shout out for that game. What a performance! From Bournemouth.
Incredible. They've been brilliant since Iraola came in, and there were a lot of doubters when they got rid of Gary O'Neill, because he should have been nominated for Manager of the Year for that job he did, but Bill Foley, the new owner, decided he wanted a certain style of football, and they'd been tracking Anthony Iraola for a long time, and they thought now's the time. And I think they've been proved right, because
and they stuck with him at the start.
They stuck with him. First 10 games. I don't think he won any of the first 9. They were in the bottom 3. Fans were getting twitchy. But I think you go and watch them now, and honestly, the style of football is incredible. The pressing, the energy levels, and the players they've signed, they're a great team to watch.
What's your best stat ever that you've said during a match?
I mean, again, I've got to come clean here and say we have a team of people at Sky, and they do provide us with stat packs for every game. And I still come up with my own, because that stat pack will go to everyone on the OB. The presenter will have it, the pundits will have it, the reporter has it. So, I've still got to come up with other things as well. But we're often given stats about resolve, and the guys work really hard on this. So, for example, when a team scores first, what's their record? And I came out with on air, when they score first, they haven't lost for like 4 years.
Right.
And of course, you know what's going to happen, don't you? I said it during the game, immediately deluged with tweets from fans of that team saying, "Oh, well, you've just absolutely killed it." Sure enough, I can't remember who it was. It was a while ago, but yeah, that one always springs to mind, because I think those fans feel if I hadn't said it, if I hadn't put it out there in the universe, they wouldn't have lost the game.
Commentator's curse, isn't it?
Classic example, yeah.
Do you remember? Wasn't it Kevin Keegan during the Euros? And is he going to score? Is he going to miss the penalty?
It was a daft question to ask him, wasn't it? Because he can't win.
No.
Of course, he's going to say yes. If he says no, then he's obviously got a downer on the player. Was it David Batty?
It was David Batty, yeah. Biggest mistake that you've made in a game?
That's a really difficult one, because I don't want to name drop here, but I had a chat about this with John Motson, who I had a great relationship with, and he said, our job is unique, because where else in broadcasting do you do hundreds of hours of live unscripted TV? Mistakes are inevitable. And he said to me, don't punish yourself when you do make a mistake, because otherwise you'll be punishing yourself constantly. And so obviously you make little mistakes. You misidentify a player. And it happens. Thankfully, I don't think I've ever done it for a goal, which is the worst. You shout the wrong name. I think that would be horrendous. But I have obviously made mistakes. We all have. And what I do now, Chris, is I give myself 2 hours from the final whistle to really have a go at myself and really punish myself. And then I say, right, I'm putting that to bed now, move on to the next game. And that works for me.
It's a bit like the striker who misses a chance, isn't it? Move on.
Exactly.
Best ever commentator that you've ever heard in your life?
Yeah, God, that's really hard, isn't it? Because we've been blessed in this country for some absolutely fantastic commentators. I mean, when I was growing up, the reason I wanted to be a commentator was really going back to Italia 90 when I was still at school. And I think it's the first tournament where I watched pretty much every game. And I used to love hearing the likes of Barry Davis and Motti and Brian Moore and Tony Gubber. John Helm. And I loved all of those guys. And, I was really lucky. I got to know Motti, as I said. We worked on 100 games together, so I got to know him quite well. Wow. I spoke to Barry Davis a few times. In fact, we had dinner together on a Champions League trip with Chelsea. Yeah. I made sure I sat at the right end of the table too. He probably regretted that, but you know what? He was so charming. He answered all my questions.
You sat that in because Roman Abramovich's security kept you away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I probably would say Barry because, again, he was very much of the opinion that you don't script anything. Everything's spontaneous.
Yeah.
And there's a clip you can watch on YouTube, I think, where I think it's Euro 96 where we played Spain at Wembley.
Yeah.
And Des Lynam throws to Barry Davis and he just says, good afternoon, Des. And the noise at Wembley is just so incredible. The atmosphere is so amazing. And he just doesn't say anything else for about 2 or 3 minutes, just lets people listen to the atmosphere. And I just thought, how brave was that?
Yeah.
To just say nothing. And, you can identify all the songs that they're singing. And at the end of it, he just goes, well, that to me is better than anything I could say.
Yeah. Because it's interesting because commentators of that era, like Barry Davis, always used to, like you say, let the action speak for itself. And if you listen to the older games now, there's big gaps in the commentary. Yeah. You don't get that now.
No, well, I've learned to say less and less over the years. And another great commentator, John Champion, said to me, if you listen to me, because he went over to work in America, and he said it was noticeable to them that he did talk less. And he said, that's my style. And actually, if you're at a game as a fan, you don't have some irritant identifying all the players for you and talking every minute. Yeah. So if you're watching the game on TV, why don't you want to hear the atmosphere more? So I have learned, I think as a young commentator, you think I'm being paid to talk here, so I need to talk. And actually knowing when not to talk is just as important. So I will let the game breathe a lot more now than I ever used to. I think it's really important, actually. Yeah. Really important. I don't think anyone would ever criticise a commentator for saying, I wish he talked more.
Yeah. And that's a difference between radio and TV, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as I said to you, when that Palace radio incident, when they said, you need to keep talking, Gary, you are constantly, probably 70% of the job is just saying who's got the ball and where is the ball. And the only time you do other stuff is when the ball's out of play or with an injury. Most of the time you are just saying left back area, plays it down 70 yards down the left hand side, great run. And you are just constantly talking. Of course, if you go from radio to TV as I did, it's very difficult to flick that switch. And I did find myself saying stupid phrases like running into the penalty area. Well, everyone can see that. Such a stupid thing to say, but it just took a long time to fade down the radio. I haven't done radio for a long time now, so I'd probably have difficulty going back the other way.
After a game and you're travelling back, we'll come on to that in a bit more, but when you're travelling back, do you think, I wish I'd said that line during the game? Have you got one?
No, only every game. I think it's more, I think to myself, why did I say that? Or why didn't I say that? Or why didn't I just stay quiet there? Or why didn't I ask the co-com's opinion? I think, you could torment yourself, Chris, to be honest, because like I said, it's live, unscripted broadcasting, and you can always think of things you should have said or shouldn't have said. If you come up with something 3 hours later, then people are going to think you've planned it in advance. You know what I mean? Yeah. Something that rhymes or is a little bit too clever to come up with spontaneously. And I think all the best commentary lines over the years have been spontaneous. Obviously. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, Kenneth Wolstenholmes, they think it's all over. But do you know, on ITV, they had the match as well?
Yes, that's right.
And Hugh Johns, do you know what he said?
Well, it was something really basic, like...
it's a goal.
It's a goal, yeah, exactly.
That was it. I read his book afterwards, and he said, he was like the man who was never known after that because Kenneth Wolstenholme got all the publicity, rightly so.
And Kenneth Wolstenholme, all he said was, some people are on the pitch because some people were on the pitch. And of course, the goal goes in just as he says it, and it is now. He said, "I could never have planned that."
No,
it was just great luck. And Hugh Johns, by the way, another brilliant commentator,
Yeah,
an amazing broadcaster.
Yeah.
From our youth.
Yeah, well,
Your youth, yeah,
I was going to say, yeah. Now, it's actually a more difficult job as well because of all the technical stuff that's going on in the background. I mean, you and I are different sides of the divide there because I'm technical. And how much is going on through your headset?
A lot of people don't realise this. Obviously, we've got the director in our ears, and he's talking to all of the camera people, all of the replay people. We've got the producer in our ears as well. We might have a PLP producer back at Stockley Park, and they're just talking
Premier League
Productions. Yeah, they're talking constantly, and you have to zone out what isn't relevant to you. And obviously, the director will say your name when it's particularly aimed at you because they're going to show a replay that you might need to talk over, or, you know, Gaz, do you want a shot of the manager, or whatever it may be. At first, it's quite shocking when you've come from radio where you haven't got that, and then suddenly you've just got this massive noise going on when you're trying to focus and concentrate. You know, you're doing the team news, and I've got a script for that. Obviously, you can't ad-lib that. And they're just talking constantly, and you just have to completely zone it out. Otherwise, you could trip over your words. And obviously, if you've got something in your ear, you might repeat it. It's very easy to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes a director might provide their own sort of ad hoc commentary, and you know, you don't want to say what they're saying because it might be completely inappropriate. So it really is a question of just completely ignoring it, but still being aware that they might be talking to you at some point.
Yeah, I always found that because there was so much noise going on and lots of people talking as well, that you know, you weren't sure, and because you had to react to the moment. And I remember a Champions League game, I was supposed to do a pan at exactly the time that the programme started after a break. And I missed my cue because I just didn't hear the director's cue. And I felt really bad about that on the drive home, you know. But the shot looked all right. I watched it back, as you do later.
It's never as bad as you think,
No,
is it? You beat yourself up about these things.
Yeah.
And at Wembley, I've just got to quickly say, I've done 7 FA Cup semi-finals at Wembley for the international feed, and the noise is just deafening.
Yeah.
And you cannot always hear what's going on in your ear.
No.
And they're cueing you, and you're thinking, are they cueing me for that, or are they cueing me for that? Have I missed a cue? And it can just be a bit chaotic, to be honest.
Yeah.
And my usual tip is just follow the pictures, because you can't go too far wrong then.
Wembley, fabulous stadium.
Yeah.
I filmed the volley with the brolly. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, 2007.
Yeah,
for Euro 2008,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Wow.
I actually got a shot of Steve McLaren with his brolly up, and I had no idea that they were going to use that.
No.
So there you go. The nightmare score. And now I'm gonna get tongue tied. East 5-4, 4-5, I think. You know?
Yeah.
But have you got any other ones like that?
Well, the good thing about being on TV, of course, is we never have to say the score. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. It's there on a graphic in front of you. But I will say I did one of my very first games for Sky was Portsmouth against Reading, and in 2007, and it ended up being the highest scoring game in the history of the Premier League, and it still is. 11 goals, Portsmouth 7, Reading 4.
Wow.
And amazing. And it's still played all the time now because it's a record breaker. There's been plenty of games with 10 goals in, but not with 11. Yeah. And after that game, obviously there was just so much excitement because it was basically last on the running order and then ended up being first.
Right.
And I think that's the only game where I basically interviewed the entirety of the teams from both sides, because they wanted the goalkeepers, obviously, because one had conceded 7, one had conceded 4 and still got smashed. Marcus Hanneman and David James it was. Amazing day. And like I say, they'll play the highlights of that on Sky even now, even after all these years.
Talking goals, what's the most memorable goal that you could say? There must be.
Wow. There's ones I'm always asked about, and I'll tell you what they are. Dele Alli's goal for Spurs against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, where the famous sort of spin and volley, and a goal of the season that year. I was very privileged to be at that game. Incredible goal. And I was really proud of what I said as well, because it was entirely off the cuff. The other one is Papi Cissé's banana shot at Stamford Bridge
Oh yeah,
for Newcastle.
that stopped Chelsea as title charge, didn't it? I think that's.
Uh,
I was at that game.
Yeah, it was. It was. Well, it was very important for Newcastle if they wanted to qualify for the Champions League.
Yeah.
They needed to win, and they did.
Yeah,
He scored 2 blinders in that game.
yeah, I remember.
I'm always asked about that one. They're the two that spring to mind. There are probably others. There was a brilliant free kick as well at West Ham against Crystal Palace. Who was that? A brilliant curler into the top corner. That was quite incredible from their French player whose name escapes me.
Oh yeah,
You know who I mean?
Yeah, didn't he? Is he the guy who went off to Marseille?
Yes, that's right.
Oh yeah, I can't remember his name.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but those first two, and I know they're a while ago now, but again, I just seem to hear the commentary from that all the time,
Yeah.
which is great.
Most controversial moment that you can remember in a match?
Oh wow, yeah, gosh, there've been so many, haven't there? And I think it's sort of increased with VAR now, because it's the thing about VAR, and I've said this to referees, is that it's still subjective, isn't it?
Yeah.
There are so many incidents where one referee would give one thing and another referee might give another. So where do we draw the line? And funnily enough, I saw the former Premier League ref Jeff Winter talking about it just this morning. I presume it was from a recent interview, just saying it shouldn't get involved in these things. You know, it should be so hands off and only correcting. And he quoted the example of the Thierry Henry handball, which stopped Ireland going to the World Cup. He said that's what we brought it in for, not. Oh, so there's some knee-on-knee contact in the box. I think we should give a penalty.
Oh,
complete madness.
Delete against West Ham.
Exactly. That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen Howard Webb come out and say that was a mistake.
Yeah.
And I just think we're getting so many times now where clubs are getting an apology, and I don't know which. I think our only solution is to keep improving it year on year.
We've all got words that we like to use, and we use them more often than others without thinking. And I was watching the podcast I did last week, and I kept using the word amazing. Is there a word like that for you that you consciously try not to overuse?
I definitely try to avoid the word sensational, because I think I've been picked up on that in the past from people. And actually, this is where social media can be really useful, because although you can get lots of abuse, you can actually get constructive criticism as well from people who like you, but say, I think you've used that word too much. I'm like, make a mental note of that. And I think the problem is that you do commentate on a lot of great goals over the course of a season, and there's only so many words you can use to describe them.
That's true.
I try to avoid that. I think it's about finding words that you could toss in occasionally, like calling it a dazzling goal rather than a fantastic goal, just to add a little bit of sparkle, bit of razzmatazz. That definitely sensational is one I try to avoid now, but I still throw it in occasionally.
I think working in TV is amongst the best jobs in the world, but like you, I'm biased as well. What makes you laugh in the job?
Well, gosh, there's so much. I mean, it is entertainment at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the co-com I've worked with the most is Tony Gale.
Okay.
And what a great guy. And you won't get him doing hours and hours of prep before a game. He'll say, I'm here to analyse 90 minutes of football. And he'll have the teams written down in formation. He'll speak to the people involved, and then he's good to go. And we've worked together so much now that he knows he can take the mick out of me and vice versa. And there'll always be something in a game with Tony that will make me laugh. Always. It may not be appropriate, Chris, but it'll always make me laugh.
Oh, well, that's good. Are you always honest about what you see in front of you? Because sometimes, let's be honest, the games are dire, aren't they?
That's a really difficult one, because no one's going to thank you for being paid to say a game is rubbish.
Yeah.
And Peter Drury put this beautifully not so long ago when he said that there'll be people at that game, however bad it is, it's their first ever game as a young kid, or first time they've paid as an adult to go to a match, and they might have been thinking about it for weeks in advance. And to them, it's hugely important and significant. And what they don't want is you saying, well, this is a load of rubbish, isn't it?
Right.
So
It's a
I
really
think,
good point,
it
yeah.
is a good point, and it really makes you think. So perhaps we are guilty of turning a pig's ear into a silk purse, or trying to.
Yeah.
I think there are ways and means of saying a game's bad, and we will always at Sky try to bring in stats in corner boxes that will say, well, actually they scored the most goals in the 76 to 90 minute mark, so there could still be a grandstand finish here,
Yeah.
even if the first 75 minutes was absolutely terrible. So I think that's how you do it, rather than just sit there moaning.
Anything ever made you really angry at a match? It could be, I don't know, the crowd. It could be anything that you've seen while you've been in the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you see people having a scrap in the away end because they've had too much to drink,
Yeah.
it still happens. And you see the stewards going into, and I feel really sorry for those stewards, because they're not being paid huge amounts of money, and they're having to wade in where the punches are being thrown. On the rare occasions that happens, I still get incredibly annoyed. I still get annoyed about some ticket pricing.
Yeah.
Like a lot of fans, those issues still really wind me up. And obviously I'm lucky I don't pay to go to games very often, but when I do, I'm always shocked.
Yeah, but the people don't realise how exhausting it is as well. isn't
Totally.
it? It's not just 90 minutes as well.
No. For a 3:00 kickoff, I'll be there by 12.
Yeah.
And I won't leave till 6. And I may have driven 4 or 5 hours to get there, and another 4 or 5 hours back. It's a long day. I'm not looking for violins here, but I think a lot of people I speak to, they do sort of think you just turn up and pick up a microphone, and there's a hell of a lot more to it than that.
Oh, yeah. Were you ever any good at playing yourself?
No, I was absolutely terrible, and I loved it, but I was always very, very little. And it's only when I got to about 15, 16 that I shot up to 6'4".
Yeah.
And I was just a really weedy little lad that got shoved off the ball so easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopeless.
What position did you play?
I was a centre back.
Right.
Again, totally inappropriate.
You'd be all right for that now, wouldn't you?
Now it would be
Lamppost.
brilliant. Yeah. Now it'd be great. But I'm way too old now. Thanks. I haven't got the energy.
Do you get nervous before you go to a game?
No, I don't get nervous. I still get the adrenaline rush. You know when you're live on Sky Sports main event and the players are in the tunnel, and you can hear the presenter and the pundits just doing their final chat before they cue to you, and you know they're about to say, let's join on commentary team, and you hear your name and it's go, go, go. So I don't get nervous, but I do still feel that live on-air excitement, which is great. And actually it keeps you hyped up, because what you don't want to sound is flat.
Yeah.
It's an event, it's an entertainment event, and I think you want to be excited about it, and I always am. I just love football at all levels. So, yeah, no, I don't get nervous.
Choose one manager or player that, if you could, you'd like to have them over to your house for dinner.
Yeah, now that's interesting, isn't it? I think you'd want someone who is quite bubbly and vivacious and likes a bit of a laugh. Someone who's definitely got a tale to tell. The thing is, you can't always tell from their personas, can you?
Yeah,
like you were talking about Jose earlier. And I think
he'd be great. By the way.
I think he'd be definitely towards the top of the list. And we were talking earlier about Wayne Rooney, and I was at Plymouth versus Portsmouth last week actually, and he's such an interesting guy. He really is.
Yeah.
And I think he's really misunderstood.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think he'd be a great guest. I really do, because you can imagine the stories he's got to tell from his days playing as well as managing. So he'd be right up there, and people might be surprised at that because he can come across as a bit dour and one-paced. But I think there's another side to Wayne, very much.
I think if I can throw something, I've got a couple actually for different reasons, but I think Ange Postecoglou, I think he'd be terrific because he's such a straight talking Aussie, isn't he?
By the way, not always the easiest to interview after a match.
Yeah.
Because as someone pre-match, brilliant. After the match, if he's lost, someone who looks down at the floor, doesn't want to give long answers. Again, the interviews tend to be quite short.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think the second one has got to be Roy Keane, hasn't it?
Yeah, true.
He's got some fabulous ones,
Agreed.
hasn't he? Yeah. we're coming near the end, actually. Best snippet of advice that anybody ever gave you when you were starting out, and it wasn't me.
Yeah, no. Well, do you know what? I've just mentioned that one from John Champion where he said talk less.
Yeah.
And that has been so influential to me, and I've always got those words ringing in my ears. And he wasn't saying it to me because he'd heard my commentary and thought, God, what a motor mouth.
Yeah.
He was saying it because it's his style, and I think it's really important to learn to talk less as a commentator. It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
I think if the golden rule, and Richie Beno always used to say this, only say something if you've actually got something meaningful to add, because people can see the pictures for themselves.
Yeah.
They don't need you telling them what they already know. So if you can add some colour, or you can add a stat which is pertinent, and I don't particularly like stats, I only add them if they really are relevant, then do it. Otherwise, shut up. And I think that's great advice.
Okay, let's have a look at current football for a minute. Thomas Tuchel, how do you think he's going to get on as England manager?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great choice. I mean, I came across him a lot when he was Chelsea manager. I always found him incredibly engaging. Very, very good coach. Very respected as a coach within the game. And I think they looked at who was available, and he was probably the best of the bunch. I think he was. I think it's weird that he hasn't started straight away, and I know he wanted a break, but we've had this weird sort of limbo period in no man's land where Lee Carsley's been in charge, but not really in charge, and consequently for this international break we've had so many players pull out, knowing that there's no consequences because the real manager starts in the new year, and obviously his first games won't be till March. It just feels like we've wasted that time a little bit, so I'm frustrated about that, but I think he'll be great. Track record of winning trophies, and ultimately that's what we all want, isn't it? And I've heard people say we've got to have an English coach. I don't agree with that at all. Lots of countries have foreign coaches. If he wins something, that's all that matters. If he doesn't, he'll be out.
Chelsea, what about what's going on there in the last couple of seasons? It seems to be coming together a bit.
Yeah, I think there were eyebrows raised when they hired Enzo Maresca, because I did a lot of Leicester last season when they got promoted, and towards the end of the season there was a lot of disquiet about him not having a plan B. That some of their results in the final sort of quarter of the season were dodgy, but I've got to say he's really managing that squad effectively. I do all the Chelsea games in the Conference League, which Chelsea have found themselves in this season.
Yeah.
Of course, they're by far the best team in that competition. I mean, they should walk it, really. They played an Armenian team called Noah last week and beat them 8-0, and it should have been double that, really.
Yeah.
And of course, he picks a completely different 11 for that than he does for the Premier League. So I think he's got it going on there. And my goodness, Chris, they've spent the money, haven't they? So they should.
Talking of spending money, Manchester United?
Yeah. Obviously about to enter a new era there, aren't they?
Yeah.
They've gone all in on Ruben Amorim. I don't know. I don't think he speaks a lot of English at the moment, does he? That's something that
actually. Yeah.
He was asked to answer a question in English when they played Manchester City, and he declined.
When they hammered Manchester City.
When they hammered Manchester City, yeah. Well, they did. Let's be honest. So let's see how that goes. I mean, he's decided not to keep Ruud van Nistelrooy, hasn't he?
Yeah, shame. I think.
I think it
understandably.
Yeah. I think he wants his own people, and that's fair enough. But there've been so many new starts at Manchester United. I think the fans are a bit wary of another one.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that for different reasons, this feels when they got Ten Hag in, people thought new start. He's going to be disciplinarian, which indeed he was. This guy, I think they think is going to play the right kind of football.
Yeah.
And I agree. It remains to be seen.
He's still got to get his own players first, doesn't he? I think it's going to take time. And is he going to get the time? I really hope so.
Well, I suppose it's appropriate for me to finish this by saying they think it's all over. It is now, and couldn't go without getting that one.
That was slick.
Yeah. So thanks very much, Gary. It's been great fun, actually, hasn't it?
Yeah. Cheers, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Next week, we're going to be hopefully chatting to a farmer and seeing what's been going on in their lives since the recent budget. So we look forward to seeing you again here from the login on the Leading Lives podcast. Goodbye.